Hello, and welcome to the third lesson of Language and the Media. This should be quite a quick lesson because it is looking at representation, and the best way of looking at representation is to get a text and start to explore it. Representation is a great thing to have in your arsenal. It's AO2. It's a concept. It's something that you will see in every single language in the media text. Actually, every text you're going to read in general. Therefore, if you are struggling to think of anything outside of that, any other concepts or theories, it's a good thing to just underpin every bit of analysis you do, and it'll give you a starting point that you can always go back to if needed. So the article is, this Father's Day, I'm giving my dad the gift of feminism. Read this article. It's from The Independent by Finley Felling, a female journalist from 2016. After you've finished, answer the questions. So who or what is being represented? So a reminder, representation is basically the groups or things that are being explored in some fashion. What's the overall tone of the piece? Is it being sarcastic, ironic, humorous, angry? It's up to you. And then what is the audience, primary, secondary, and purpose of this text? So about 10 to 15 minutes by the time you read it and do the questions. You've got 5 seconds on the video. So you may have come up with a range of different ideas, but I've given you 8 on the left-hand side here. So Felling, the actual author, every single time you read a piece of writing by someone, that they are representing themselves by the fact that they chose to write it, by the fact that they've left bits out, included bits, by the fact that they've put it in a certain order, used certain words. So you always really should be looking at representations of the author first and foremost. Then within the article, ideas around fathers, traditional family life, modern family life, feminism and masculinity all pop up and are worth exploring in more detail. The last two are quite interesting though. So The Independent, by choosing to include this on their website, are also being represented in some way. The fact that they gave this forum for someone to discuss this idea gives us ideas about the sort of paper they are and what values they bring as well. And the last one is one of the more challenging bits, but the implied audience. So whilst every single piece of writing is written for an audience, that audience brings its own implied values to reading the text. So we will need to start to consider actually what values do they already have before they've even accessed this, because it will change somewhat how they interpret some of the information, perhaps if they already have, for example, maybe ideas about feminism, ideas about the traditional family life, so on and so forth. It just says here, for each, try and identify the manner in which they are presented in the article by finding evidence of language patterns and language use. So effectively, what are we learning about Felling? What are we learning about Felling's ideas about fathers? What are we learning about the ideas about the traditional family life and the modern family life, so on and so forth. You should be able to find evidence. Sometimes the evidence is as straightforward as, the fact that the article is there shows this about something. That's fine. But it does say here language level, so you should be looking not only at pragmatics and discourse, which is kind of like the bigger things. You should be looking at lexis and grammar, the words that are being used, how they're being used in sentences, and what it shows us about the attitude of the author. It should probably take you sort of 15 to 20 minutes because you do need evidence for all 8 of these, and it should hopefully help you build a very strong understanding of the meaning of the article, but how all the ideas are explored as you go forward. So yeah, 15 to 20 minutes. You've got about 5 seconds on the video. And this is the last slide. So as I said, quite a short video. This is a paragraph that was written by the exam board, and I'm always a bit wary of showing exam board examples that are written by the exam board rather than other students, primarily because it's written by people who are not like your average student. So they are not necessarily what you guys will come up with, and they can almost be a little bit too good in some aspects or a little bit too developed in certain ways I wouldn't expect necessarily of a student, but it's a worthwhile thing to have a bit of a look at. I did say here it's by no means perfect example of some language analysis. I think it's a little bit too driven by terminology, but that's my own personal preference. What I'd like you to do is read it, have a look at it. Firstly, identify where the AO2 and the AO3 marks are gained in this paragraph. So where are they talking about concepts and theory? Now, the obvious thing here being it's a representation-based lesson, therefore where are representations being discussed? And then how are those representations linked to the context? So remember, genre, audience, purpose, production, reception, ideas around that. Using this as your kind of starting point or as a springboard, I would then suggest you write a second paragraph exploring a different part of the text. Remember, the focus is on representation. So the easy way of doing that would be to take something else from the table that you've already filled in and just exploring the language use and how that shows that representation link it to context, and then that's your paragraph. As always, I think I've suggested before to you the idea being, identify the language pattern or identify the language use, link it to a concept or a theory, in this instance representation, and then link it in some ways to the genre, audience, purpose, so on and so forth. That's the lesson, really. So what I would do normally in school is I would be giving you lots of text to prep to sort of practice this skill. So this lesson will be now, and then the next lesson we'd look at another text together in a similar way and have it and explore it. So what that means is for the next few weeks, whilst the first lesson of each week I'll try and drop in some new information, I will also be spending time just basically making some texts available to you that I see as your second lesson of the week. And basically all I'd want you to do is a bit like what you've done here. Read them, analyse them, look at representation, but also start to pick out things to do with maybe language change, power, gender. Because remember, representation is just a sort of a tool that you'll use, but you can look at elements of power, elements of gender, elements of language change, elements of technology, of course. The reason behind this is the more you read, the better you'll get. It's quite straightforward. So therefore, if you do one a week where you just pull it apart, have a look at it in detail, that will be beneficial. I will share at least 2 of you every week, and it's up to you. You can do one as a minimum, but if you wanted to do both, and I would suggest some of you should do both, that's completely up to you as well. But it just means that it'll be one sort of lesson and one video, and then one thing where you're left to your own devices to do a bit of analysis. As always, any questions, concerns, please let me know. Stay safe and be well, and I will. There'll be videos, sort of new videos next week, I guess. Anyway, bye bye.